Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to be talking with author, creator Cameron Chittock. Cameron, thank you for jumping in. Thank you for taking some time to join me.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
My pleasure. Thank you for saying yes. And I want to start by mentioning a couple of titles. And I also want to note that just based on our conversation, one of the other points we have in common is that you work in the world of education. And so just sending appreciation for that and appreciation for the middle grades, span of time that is such a special and unique and sometimes challenging time for people. I spent 8 years as a middle school teacher, so I know that part of the experience well.
I think there should be a special sainthood for people who teach middle school. It's because it is a special time, but it's a special time. It's a
Yeah.
lot. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a special like sainthood for teachers at all levels. I think I will
Right.
say each one has its own challenges for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Now you've worked in the Mapmaker series, which is a graphic novel series really sort of aimed primarily at middle grades, but of course upper elementary and beyond, really upper elementary to the end of life, I think could be a good span for that. And you've also worked in some popular titles, popular characters like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I just want to note those, and we'll come back around to talk about all of the work and hopefully the things to come. But curious what connected you to the world of comics and graphic novels.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I could, there's both no way for me to explain why I love comics and graphic novels so much, or I could also give like a 4 hour dissertation.
Hmm.
But I think it kind of goes back to the discovery of it for me, just kind of hit me at a really important age. I think my first comics that I fell in love with were Calvin and Hobbes.
Hmm.
I'm actually from just outside one of the towns where the town where Bill Watterson lived. And so like the local bookstore that we went to always had as much as even though Watterson is notoriously a recluse, the bookstore would always have Calvin Hobbes right up front and center. And so that was kind of my first foray into it. I just loved those books, read them all the time. And then when I was like 11 years old, I found, I was in my grandparents' house in my dad's old bedroom from his childhood bedroom, and found this dusty old box of what was left of his comic collection that
Nice.
my grandparents had miraculously not thrown out. And and he had, it was mostly single issue stuff from the late 60s, early 70s. But I just as a kid just absolutely was enamored by them and fascinated by them. And as much as we worry about now so much about like what's a good jumping on point? How do you introduce people? There is something
Hmm.
really special about grabbing issue 156 and just trying to figure out what's going on. Um, and so, yeah, I think kind of getting those at the exact right age, just, that was, they were really, really, kind of a formative moment for me. And I've been reading them ever since, loving them ever since. And I think the other piece of it too is I don't, as much as I am a writer, I don't really have any artistic ability. So there is something about um, that combination of words on the page and seeing what artists can do that just continues to amaze me and blow me away and move me. And I think that's what I kind of keep coming back to, even though I'm on the writing side. My love for both the writing and the reading of it, it just always comes back to the art and how they're able to convey emotion and drama and action, all that stuff on a page. It just I will never stop being uh, fascinated and enamored by it.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask, speaking of collaboration, about what that's been like working with. Is it Amanda Castillo? Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, on the sorry, excuse me, Map Maker books in particular.
It's been, yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. I think, for me, I've been writing comics since I was in high school, and my sort of process was I write a script. I said, wow, this is great. And then I put it in a drawer and nothing ever happens with it, And so working with Amanda was my first real time in earnest where you get to see someone take something that you wrote and put their own ideas, their own vision, their own background, their own interest into it. And that process on its own has been just incredibly rewarding and a thrill. Um, but it's been even better in that Amanda and I, we just have really kind of hit it off from the beginning. So we become good friends, and it's made that whole experience that much more rewarding. Uh, and it was cool because I think we didn't know each other at all before we started working together. On like the first call we had, our editor Whitney Leopard had sent Amanda the pitch and I think like an early version of this story synopsis,
Mhm.
and uh, just talking on the phone with Amanda, like they immediately got what I was trying to do. And I think they even like summarized the theme of the series. I had spent like a whole page trying to figure it out, and they like summarized it in a sentence. I was like, oh wow, okay, you've got this. I handle this better than I even do. And that just I think so. I think we've been kind of in lockstep from the beginning, while still again just kind of being able to bring our own ideas and influences into it. So
Yeah, yeah. Now, I was going to ask about the genres that you're drawn to because I'll say Mapmaker is a really cool sort of fantasy take and really interesting things that happen in that book. So I'm curious about that draw to fantasy, the draw to creating in that particular world.
yeah, I mean fantasy is definitely my favorite genre. And I think that, going back to like what I was reading as a kid when I still reading it, the alongside comics, reading fantasy books was always kind of my biggest genre that I would find myself in.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I think it's changed now, but as a kid, there weren't graphic novels. There weren't as many graphic novels for kids in general, but definitely not ones that kind of hit from the fantasy aesthetic and tone the way a lot of the books I was reading there really enjoyed. So
Hmm.
I think that was part of the hope of Mapmakers is, it's writing a book for kids, and I was partly writing for a book that I wish I had as a kid. And I know Amanda brought a lot of that, into the art as well of, visually what would this world, what's the kind of world and kind of characters that they wish they had seen as a kid. So um, and Amanda's also a fantasy fan as well, so we kind of were able to dive into that with Map Makers for sure.
Hmm. Hmm. And there are two books in the series at this point, is that right?
Yes, yeah, two books so far, and then the last one comes out in April of next year, so that'll be the finale, which is nice. We were able to kind of know from the beginning it was going to be three, so we were able to plot it out and really kind of hopefully have it feel like a complete story and stick the landing in the third one. We'll see, but that's the hope anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And also very cool that you're working in this space of middle grades graphic novels, which is a really vibrant space right now in reading and publishing, and working in the world of popular characters like TMNT. So, what's that been like?
I think it's nice that the comics in general that we have like multiple markets now, or it's like their own little mini industries,
Hmm.
um, which is I think we're getting comics into in different avenues and into more people's hands, which I think is great. So and as someone who reads, who still goes to his comic shop on Wednesday and is, my happy place is my bags and boards.
Hmm.
But is also, reading middle grade stuff and reading, books like Kate Beaton's Ducks, and, the being able to kind of play in both those spaces, or two of those spaces, was definitely something I was interested in. And it was a different set of pressures writing Turtles and Stranger Things. I think when you're writing your own stuff, you're kind of trying to convince people to care. Like, you should care
Hmm.
about these characters. They're great. You should care about this world. Um, but when you're going into Turtles and Stranger Things, people already care, and people were like, as soon as the thing was announced, people were, I was getting tagged in posts with takes on what should happen and what shouldn't happen. And, so you do kind of get hit a little bit with that stress. Especially because like Turtles, I, there's photo evidence of me loving turtles since I was like 3 years old,
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's you don't want to, even for something as kind of silly and fun as a Stranger Things crossover, like you still want to do those characters, you do right by those characters. Um, but honestly, it turned out to be the most fun I've ever had writing. Like I just absolutely it was just a joy to write. I had so much fun. Um, I was the first time when I was writing, and I didn't. Again, I think the in a weird way, it turned out that the pressure of doing your map makers and you're trying to get your whole heart and soul into these books, especially because those were my first ones. So I didn't know if I'm ever was going to write anything ever again. So it's like this might be my only shot. I have to put everything I am into these books. And with turtles, it's like I've been telling turtle stories in my head since I was on a tricycle. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just had an absolute blast writing that, and getting to just kind of write those characters.
Yeah, cool, cool. I'm curious, I'm going to tuck in a question here since you're working in the world of education. Do your students know your secret identity as a comics creator? Has that been a point of connection for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I think um, the when it was map makers, I think the fact that there was this physical book that you could see, it was on Amazon, it was on in bookstores. Like, I think that part was cool. I think the Turtle Stranger Things of it was a little more, uh, you can kind of wrap your head around it a little bit more,
Mhm,
for them. And uh, but yeah, and I think it's fun working at school, kind of knowing that I'm also doing that in my free time. I think partly because you know even though the love for comics came from finding the comics myself, like the love for writing and actually becoming a writer only happened because of teachers. I was definitely the beneficiary of teachers who I was, you know, very passionate and excited about story. And I had teachers who took me, kind of under their wing and made time for me and made time to read my horrible scripts, that I was producing, and give feedback and encouragement and guidance and all that. So, um, and even, even just, I remember there was a substitute teacher we had that would show up, once every couple months, who was a comic reader and would, then kind of chat with me about whatever was coming out at that time. So yeah, I think, we have a book club here at school. And so getting to kind of, um, just engage with kids who are excited about story and excited about reading. And it's been a nice full circle moment for sure.
Yeah, yeah, very cool, very cool. So you mentioned part three of Mapmakers is coming out. You said April, is that right?
April, yeah, April next
Okay.
year.
So curious about what you're thinking about next in the creative journey, thinking about where people can go to follow along, to check out what you're doing, all of those next steps, points of connection for listeners out there.
Yeah, so I'm in kind of that weird place where I've got a number of things coming out next year, um, but I can't talk about them yet. So I'm like eager to actually start talking. So, one is another sort of license, project that I think actually that one will probably be announced. That's gonna come out in the spring, so that should be announced relatively soon. And then, I'm gonna be doing a short thing, but with a character who's a bucket list character for me. So I'm very, again, nervous, but excited for that. And really just kind of hoping to continue doing books in the middle grade space, but also kind of the more, adult or drug market, leaning space as well. So hopefully, yeah, and then it's just the life of a writer. You've got pitches out, you're
Mhm.
talking with artists, you're waiting to hear. And so, yeah, and then, in terms of finding all that whenever it does get announced, I have a Twitter account or an X account, if we're calling it that, that I use pretty sparingly, and then a website, CameronWTChittock.com, that I'm trying to post everything at. But yeah, so we'll see. It's the end of the year. I found, like, at this time last year, I didn't quite know that I was going to be writing turtles yet. And then, my entire year this year has been turtles and Stranger Things. So you kind of, I feel like, especially with the single issue stuff, a lot of it comes together quickly. So, excited to see, where we all end up in the next year.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
spring for sure. There's some cool stuff happening.
Cool, cool. Well, wonderful things. And I am just so glad as an educator and as a reader that middle grades comics, graphic novels have sort of taken off in the past 10 years. So appreciate the work that you're doing in that space and just encouraging teachers, librarians, readers out there to check out the Mapmakers series. And also appreciating the work you're doing in the world of licensed material as well. So looking forward to the
Thanks.
things that are coming.
Yeah, and I will just say, I mean, it is, and I'm sure you've kind of seen as well, just more and more graphic novels on shelves in classrooms
Hmm.
is just, it never stops being cool to me. And I think you saying the map makers for middle grades till and for everyone, I think that's part of what I think is so exciting about a lot of the books that kids have access to now, is I think these comics and graphic novels um, are the ones that that kids are going to be revisiting when they get older, and they're going to have new meaning and a new appreciation for it in a different light, which I think is, again, I think that's an important piece to sort of creating long-term comics readers, is making books that they're not going to want to leave forever once they outgrow the age group. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have one more question before you go, but I'll ask that after the end of the episode. But thanks very much for jumping on. Thanks for joining, and glad to talk with you anytime.
Thank you so much. Anytime.